kidnapping. Hurry, please.
The brutal murder of 6-year-old JonBenet Ramsey in her home on Christmas night in 1996, shocking the nation and fueling a frenzy of media coverage that would last for years.
It was a case that people couldn't stop talking about.
As a new Netflix docuseries contends, problems with the investigation appeared early on.
Why was the Ramsey house not sealed off as a crime scene until several hours after the kidnapping was reported?
The decades-old case now striking a chord with a new generation on social media and a new push to pursue the case nearly 30 years later. In the late 90s, suspicion and unusual theories of the case focused on the Ramseys, her parents, John and Patsy, and brother Burke.
A bedwetting or a toileting issue
that caused Patsy to get mad at her daughter.
Absolutely.
No one has ever been charged in the case. Patsy Ramsey passed away from cancer in 2006. 2 years later, the Boulder district attorney cleared the family, pointing to DNA evidence. Now 80, John Ramsey recently telling Savannah he's never going to give up searching for the killer.
You still have hope that this can be solved?
I believe it can be solved if the police accept help from outside their system.
Boulder's current police chief says the department has been working for years with other law enforcement agencies and outside experts, including recent efforts by the Colorado Cold Case Review Team.
Those files include more than 21,000 tips, over 1,000 interviews, which were conducted across 17 states and 2 foreign countries.
Documentarian Joe Berlinger says he believes police could be doing more.
Certain items that were sent to the crime lab that were never tested should be tested.
Boulder PD writing, the assertion that there is viable evidence and leads we are not pursuing to include DNA testing is completely false. The haunting case frustrating investigators and a family still seeking closure after nearly 3 decades.
Now, over the years, several persons of interest have come up, including John Mark Carr, who was arrested in 2006 after making what police say was a false confession. He and others were ruled out in part because their DNA didn't match. But some who followed the case, guys, from the start say the tainted crime scene makes it impossible to really rule anyone out. Savannah.
All right, Liz, thank you. We want to turn now to NBC News legal analyst Danny Cevallos. Danny, good morning. These cases, they just never go away, especially when, like this one, it is unsolved. John Ramsey out there still hoping that this could be resolved. But, I mean, the crime scene was tainted early on, and I think the Boulder police have acknowledged missteps. Can you ever solve a crime in those circumstances?
It is very difficult, especially 3 decades after a crime is committed. Witnesses die, they move away, and in fact, even the killer may no longer be alive after 30 years. I mean, JonBenet's father is 80. I mean, people have aged a lot since this, and the killer may be gone forever if he's or she is ever identified. It would be virtually impossible to prosecute. And actually, from a defense perspective, as a defense attorney, I've defended decades-old murder cases. They're equally as difficult on the defense side because, think about it, could any of us track down where we were and what we were doing 28 years ago on a particular day? So these cases are difficult on both sides.
But they keep talking about DNA. They want to retest the DNA because there's new technology now. So what do you think about going down that road?
Yes, there is some massive advances in DNA technology in just the last 10 years. The old version, I would call it, of police DNA evidence relied on a patchwork of police law enforcement databases. Things have changed with the advent of investigative genealogy. Now they compare it to larger databases, about 3 million, 2 major databases, and they can build, they don't need an exact hit, they can build a family. They can find someone's distant cousin and then triangulate from there using things like Facebook and social media. So tremendous advances. It is an expensive proposition, but according to JonBenet's father, the offer has been there for outside agencies or groups to come in and help out, and that offer, according to Mr. Ramsey, has been refused by police.
Danny, I know you've been following the case for a number of years now. Based on what we know and perhaps what we don't know, what's the likelihood that this ever gets solved, that charges are ever filed?
Low likelihood, I would have said almost zero. But with the advent of this investigative genealogy, you can, if the DNA itself was collected from a reliable source, because context is everything. DNA captured, for example, under a victim's fingernails has much more meaning than, say, DNA that might be on a light switch or a countertop, because we know a lot more about the transfer of DNA today. So that cuts both ways. DNA can be a fantastic case clearer, but we also know now that our DNA, by just touch transfer, can move all around the country. If you're on an airplane or on a bus, it's moving out to another state you may never have been to in your life.
Just real quickly, if you watch this docuseries, there were a host of potential suspects who were cleared because of the DNA in the case. But if the crime scene is problematic, if the testing was old, do they need to re-examine some of those, like a John Mark Carr, for example, or some of these other suspects?
Yeah, I would say probably the only hope at this point is DNA evidence, because from a defense perspective, if they've interviewed 1,000 people, they have 1 million pages of documents in the police file. That's a whole lot of potential other suspects that a defense attorney can point to. And although the defense wouldn't have any burden of their own, frequently what we do is come up with an alternate theory, an empty chair defense. Hey, the police got tunnel vision on this person, but they ignored this person. And you essentially build a case against that third party. And after 28 years, there might be a lot of third parties to point the finger at.
Danny, thank you very much.
Thanks,
Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for watching. Don't miss the Today Show every weekday at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 Pacific on our streaming channel, Today All Day. To watch, head to today.com/allday or click the link right here.